you said something that's very interesting about arrogance. Um, when it comes to making truth claims, usually that is a connotation, especially when it comes to religious truth claims. Like if I say Christianity is true, well, by definition, that would make everything else false, every other religious claim, because they're contradictory. They're fundamentally contradictory with one another.
Or at least where they would contradict at a specific point,
Sure.
then they would at that point be in error. So not a total black and white, but there's when truth claims are being made, because there could be a lot of overlap and agreement on certain truth claims as well.
So does that matter? Is it in the arrogance charge? I guess. Does it really matter in this conversation about truth?
Well, it can affect your presentation. That if you approach something you can say is true and factually matching up with reality, but you can express it in such a way that is arrogant and gives a sense, perhaps there's a certain smugness or an air of superiority that comes along with it, which of course is deeply problematic. When the Christian makes the claim that Jesus is the only way, this should not be, we should not approach, we should not come across in any other way except a humble way. The Christian faith is a matter of grace rather than our own achievement. It's not because we're smarter, better, etc., than other people. It's simply because Jesus has stepped into this world and I receive the gift that is offered without any sense of superiority. It's a matter of but for the grace of God go I. And so it's not a matter of boasting about achievement. Boasting is excluded, Paul says in Romans 4. And so I think that how you present the gospel is important. It doesn't change the truth of the gospel, even if you come across as superior, judgmental, arrogant, and so on. But I think the truth of the gospel should affect our own demeanor, our own disposition, that we should walk humbly before God and before others.
Yeah, I suppose this is what Peter's talking about when he says, do this in gentleness and respect.
Exactly.
But nonetheless, people will accuse Christians of being arrogant. And I guess there's a way we can navigate that. In your experience, what have been some kind of practical ways you've been able to navigate that?
I think it's helpful to remember that people are not relativists because they have thought things through and have arrived at what they take to be an intellectually superior position. It's not as though they've logically thought these things through, because the laws of logic themselves are fixed and unwavering. And people will use the laws of logic to argue in defense of relativism. So they believe that there are certain inescapable realities or truths that they cannot deny without contradicting themselves. So I do keep in mind that people are not relativists because of intellectual reasons primarily, but perhaps I think authority reasons. They may have had negative experiences with authority, and so they don't trust authority. And I think that's why it's important for us to remember that we need to help people through our lives, through our conversation, move from a place of distrust to trust. That we are not, I should say, someone has said we need to be like the fifth gospel to people. Before they pick up the canonical gospels, the four gospels, and read them, they'll want to see the gospel in our lives. That, as Paul said to the Corinthians, he says, you are our epistle, you are our letter, written in our hearts, known and read by all people. And so it should be that way with those who are perhaps suspicious of truth claims, suspicious of authority, that we, through relationship, through personal connection, reveal that there is a trustworthy, faithful person who is communicating this message, and that perhaps there is a faithful God who can also be trusted. And so our lives can present a bridge to people who are skeptical or suspicious of any kind of truth claim. I also think it's helpful to remind people that, or I think just to ask people why they are relativists, why they take the relativistic position, and and find out what their pilgrimage has been like, what has their intellectual journey been like. And a lot of times, when you ask them that, it reveals that their conclusions about relativism don't come so much from an intellectual grounding, but more along the lines of something personal, something that has, some damage that has come to them, that they don't trust authority, they don't trust people, and you can understand why for many reasons. But also reminding people that to take the position of relativism is to take an authoritative stance. We can't escape an authoritative stance. Wherever we take a view, we will do so because we believe that other positions are inaccurate or in error, and that we are taking a stance that we believe to be intellectually superior, maybe morally superior to others. And then it's right to ask, what is your justification for that stance? Most people, when they are asked, they don't say, well, this is just my position, this is just my preference, and I recognize that people hold different views and I just can't speak against them, I can't say anything about them, this is just my own, like a personal opinion, and I'm not going to criticize anyone. They're trying to be as consistent as possible. But there is often behind that a belief that this is a superior position. And most often, when you ask people, they can get very upset or angry when you start to ask them about why they hold the views that they do. If you challenge them, and they disagree and argue with you, it's because they are not true relativists, because they take their position to be true, and that because you disagree with them, you would at that point be in error. So it's helpful to remember that no one can avoid taking a stance on these issues. And also keep in mind that people who say that there is no such thing as truth are actually affirming that it's true that there is no truth. People who say that you cannot know are actually saying that I know that you can't know. And so taking a stance is going to be ultimately inescapable. We will hold to certain truths, beliefs, even if tentatively we will take them to be the preferred position intellectually. And so it's important to say, well, what is the justification for that position? I'd like to hear more about that.
Can you comment on tolerance and what it should mean, what people mean by it today, and how we should kind of navigate and speak about that?
Yeah, tolerance used to be, in its classical definition, it had something negative built into it. You tolerated something you didn't like, you didn't enjoy, you tolerated something you had to put up with. You tolerate someone who's snoring on the plane without having, without maybe gagging him or something like that. You tolerate people's body odor if you're sitting on a bus and you don't remove them from the bus or something like that. So tolerance used to be putting up with what you take to be disagreeable or false. But in our day, it has come to mean accepting all views as true, celebrating all views. The problem is you can't accept, say, the Buddhist view that God does not exist and the Christian view that God does exist. You can't say, I accept your view. Well, what does that even mean? I think what you probably mean is something like the classical view, that I may not agree with you, but I accept you or respect you as a person. But like I said, there's relativists often collapse person and belief, and so that if there's disagreement, then you are rejecting the person with whom you're disagreeing. And so again, it's just a fundamental error in distinction. So that's something that we are often poorly navigating. Tolerance means putting up with what you take to be disagreeable or false. And unfortunately, with the relativist who takes tolerance to be the highest virtue, and again, he believes that you should never be intolerant, so that you've got a moral standard there. But the relativist cannot possibly accept all views as true. But what ends up happening is that you basically go along with everybody else's view until your own view is challenged. That's when the relativist can get angry. That's when the relativist can get upset, and no longer treats his own viewpoint as relative to himself, but actually sees his view as absolute. And if you disagree with that, then you are in error, which of course undermines relativism.
It's interesting. The thing that comes to my mind is that this view of tolerance will naturally lead to violence of some sort. Like you said earlier, that it becomes kind of an issue about force. Whoever's in power gets to demand and dictate how other people function, which is, again, generally when I talk to people who want to be tolerant, they're very kind people. They're not violent people. They don't want to go out there and and hurt folks for their views. But it seems to me that's kind of the natural, logical conclusion.
Yeah, the and I think that that's really what we are left with if we allow the relativist to have this self-contradictory view of tolerance to have its way. That ultimately, if I disagree with you, if you don't agree with my relativism, then it now becomes a matter of power. Whoever, I'm not going to let you get away with your view of tolerance. You have to accept my view of tolerance, which means that any viewpoint that disagrees with relativism has to be punished, has to be dealt with. And so that is, again, a very frightening sort of scenario where power now becomes the issue because truth, principled dialogue, debate, and so forth are totally removed from the picture. And so now what you're left with is coercion.